Welcome to the latest edition of the Christian Recorder Dialogues. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs, and I'm hoping everyone is having a great holiday season. I have the privilege of being with us this afternoon, Bishop Reginald Jackson, as well as Mr. John Jackson, who is the youngest chair ever of the DeKalb County Democratic Executive Committee. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good to be here. Now, when we start these dialogues off, we always like to ask our guests to describe what role your faith, as well as the AME Church specifically, have had in your professional as well as personal lives. So I'm going to, with deference, give Bishop Jackson the first crack at that, and then John Jackson, I will be coming to you for your answer as well. Bishop Jackson?
Yes. Well, I've been AME about all of my life, and going to Turner Seminary in Atlanta, I was introduced to the influence and impact the Black preacher could have in the life of the community. And that has really shaped and affected my ministry. And so we're just trying to keep up the work here in Georgia.
Yes, sir. God bless. We're glad to have you here. And John Jackson, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about what role your faith has had in your personal as well as professional life.
Absolutely. I mean, I've grown up in the Baptist church, actually. I've been in the Baptist church most of my life, and I would not be where I am now without falling back on my faith. God has delivered me through some very tough times, and in politics in particular, there are times where you're at a crossroads and you do have to fall back on your faith and give things to God when you don't know how to go forward. You just got to give it to God. And I am grateful. And, I'm grateful for the tradition to fall back on, the values to fall back on that were given to me growing up in the church. And those are values that have never left me. There were times where I strayed, but thank God did not stray. I thank the Father above that He did not stray from me, and like the prodigal son, allowed me to come back.
Amen. And with that, gentlemen, again, welcome to the show. And I want to go to our second question, which is, we all know that Georgia has not sent a Democrat to the United States Senate in over 15 years. Before we came on air, Chairman Jackson and I, Bishop Jackson, had a very interesting discussion about the racial demographics, as well as the journey from when Georgia was solidly Democratic back during Jim Crow to now, where it is considered, for a long time, it's been considered solidly Republican. And then this year, somewhat purple, whereby obviously Joe Biden has been able to win, first time since, I believe, Bill Clinton in 1992, that the state has gone blue in the presidential race. And then right now, obviously, we are a little over a month away from the runoff race between Reverend Raphael Warnock, Morehouse brother of mine, and pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and versus Kelly Loeffler, the current incumbent Republican, and John Ossoff versus incumbent Republican David Perdue. With that in mind, with regards to Reverend Warnock, I want to ask you two gentlemen, how important is it that he this year, and Stacey Abrams 2 years ago when she ran for governor up there in Georgia, that as African Americans, they have been competitive in statewide races in Georgia? Go ahead and take first crack at that, John Jackson, Chairman Jackson.
Well, the reality is that Black candidates have been competitive in Georgia statewide for a while. When you think about who the last statewide elected Democrats were, they were Black. They were Michael Thurman, who was labor commissioner, and it was Thurgood Baker, who was attorney general. So let's put out there first, Black candidates have been winning statewide in Georgia. Now today's win coalition makes a strong Black candidate even more competitive, because today's win coalition is a lot larger percentage Black and African American than it used to be. When it was the old Democratic Party. So I think that the question or the narrative shouldn't be that you're surprised that a Black person is competitive statewide. The question is, why wouldn't they be?
Understood. Bishop Jackson, will you want to take a crack at that question?
Yes. When I was at Turner Seminary and I left in 79, then it was primarily a Democratic state. But around 1980, shortly after that, the state changed. In fact, many of them who held statewide offices following that were Democrats who switched to Republican. For example, Sonny Perdue was a Democrat, turned Republican, became governor. So that was a shift. But what's happened from 2016 to 2020, the demographics in Georgia have significantly changed. Over those last 4 years, over 800,000 new registered voters in Georgia, many of them Black and people of color. And what happened in 2020 that didn't happen in 2018 with Stacey Abrams, we had tremendous voter suppression in 2018, where you had 500,000 people whose names were dropped from the roll. In 2020, the turnout among Blacks and people of color astounded everybody. In fact, when Donald Trump went to bed on November the 3rd, he was leading in Georgia by 300 and some thousand votes, but they had not yet started to count the absentee and early voting, which was overwhelmingly Black and Democratic. And that's why Joe Biden was able to win the state of Georgia. So I think with the demographic shift, the emphasis now on turnout. And this runoff, the important thing is going to be turnout. Whoever turns out their voters will win the election.
Absolutely, Bishop, which is a perfect segue into my next question, gentlemen, which is turnout is going to be so critical. We know that many of the pundits have suggested that turnout in runoff races is usually clearly not as significantly high as it is during the regular race. And so I want to ask you what things are you looking to see the churches do and or different charitable groups or organizations to help turn out the vote here toward the end of this month when early voting starts all the way through January 5th. John Jackson, go ahead and take that first, brother.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, we're in the last week where you can register. So obviously, if there's anyone new to be registered, that needs to be concluded in the next 5 days because we're running up on that registration deadline. But the churches, they, especially these larger churches, but the smaller churches too, make sure that your entire congregation is getting to the polls. Make sure you're getting folks to the polls who need rides. Make sure that your congregation knows how they can volunteer through local organizations like the NAACP or DeKalb Democrats, or that members in the congregation that are involved in these organizations get a chance to just tell the congregation. And so, because we know that when the church votes, we win. When the church votes, because the church is a large swath of the voting base in Georgia, and particularly the Democratic voting base. So we are definitely plugging into that via our grassroots leaders here in DeKalb Democrats. They are very involved in their churches. So I am looking forward to seeing them repeat what they did in the November 3rd election.
Very good. Bishop Jackson, what are some things that either you are going to be encouraging the churches within your jurisdiction, your own church, and or other organizations within our communities to make sure that we get people to understand that, hey, we've got one more left. We can't just rest on the laurels that we were able to turn Georgia blue for Biden. We really need to get those 2 Senate seats as well. What do you suggest, sir?
Well, historically, turnout in runoffs is lower, especially among Blacks than in the general election. But I just got off a call about 20 minutes ago with ministers across the state dealing with voter turnout and, in fact, registration. And for example, the AME Church, we have over 400 AME churches in the state of Georgia. We put in place a program called Operation Voter Turnout. Our goal was to get 75% of blacks to either vote by absentee ballot or early voting October the 30th. And we are delighted with the way it turned out. The program worked extremely well. All of our churches made sure that everybody in that congregation and their families got to vote. We're doing the same thing again for the runoff election. And I think the difference will be, one, the fact that you have Raphael Warnock, a black pastor, running. That makes it easier in a lot of respects of getting blacks engaged. But number two, I think blacks, especially millennials, are paying attention. While we're happy that we're getting rid of Donald Trump, is just as important that Mitch McConnell is no longer the majority leader of the Senate. And so that gives us a second point, because what Mitch McConnell has done in a lot of respects has been very detrimental to blacks and, in fact, to the nation. And so I think people are going to be surprised at the turnout of blacks in the runoff in January. Right now, I think Ossoff and Warnock are probably viewed as underdogs because traditionally turnout among blacks is lower, but I think they're going to be shocked in January, just like they were shocked in November, because I think you're going to see a unexpected turnout of blacks for this runoff.
From your lips to God's ears, we pray. And with that, again, we want to thank everybody who has joined in with us during the lunch hour for this episode of the TCR Dialogues. And we ask for you to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the comment section and give a shout out to your home church as well as your home district. With that, gentlemen, I want to move on to the question that we both know, or we all know, that since Election Day, President Donald Trump has continuously sounded the bell that there was massive voter fraud in this year's election with no evidence. There has been absolutely no evidence. I think in just about every suit that he's filed so far, which is over 30, he has been defeated in all but one. And the one that he won was a minute procedural issue that will have actually no ultimate outcome. It will not deal with the outcome of the election at all. With that in mind, it has frustrated a lot of people that here we are almost a month away from Election Day, and yet this president has yet to call and or concede to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I am not optimistic that he will do just that, but I am optimistic. Matter of fact, I know full well that come January 20th, that Kamala Harris, as well as Joe Biden, the president, will be inaugurated as president of the United States and vice president. With that in mind, has it surprised either of you gentlemen to not only see that Donald Trump has made these false allegations of wrongdoing across the country, but that there are so many millions of Americans that are supporters of his that seem to have bought into it? John, go ahead and take it away first.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say this. Nothing that President Donald Trump does surprises me at all. He is basically liable to do anything. He does what he does to keep his name out there and stay relevant. The good thing is that a concession is not a legal thing. That's just a gesture. And the government has begun the official transition of the Biden administration. And so for that reason, as you said, Biden will be president come January 20th. But I also want to tell to the Trump voters, a lot of them are considering boycotting this runoff. And if that's what they want to do, then they should follow their hearts. And I think that I would never dissuade anybody from doing what they believe is the right thing to do. They want to send the Republican Party a message. And, that is what it is. If they want to do that, then, that's what they should do. But my primary concern is getting out the vote in DeKalb County. And as long as we do that, we'll be good.
John, let me ask you this. I want to follow up with you right quick before we shift to the bishop. Before we went on air earlier, you and I were talking a little bit about how so many Republicans, particularly across the country, but definitely in the deep South, sometimes are voting against their own, what would seem to be their own economic interests and things of that nature. What do you think plays a role in why some people who would definitely benefit from Democratic politics and Democratic policies tend to shift toward the Republican Party and statewide as well as national elections? What are your thoughts on that, Chairman Jackson?
Well, it supersedes even party labels. Since really, I think about the Civil War and how working class, blue collar white folks were fighting for the right for rich white folks to own slaves. And I think when you look at how the Republican Party operates today, it's really similar. It's like they get their votes from a working class populace. They fire them up on all sorts of red meat issues, and it's to benefit them, but not the masses who are getting them that win. And it is they are tapping into the worst side of humanity, not the best side of humanity. And it was really masterminded by Richard Nixon. The Nixon Southern strategy is how the Republicans took the South from the Dixiecrats. And Donald Trump was really the implosion of it. He was the final product of that, in my opinion. And he was that exact same strategy. You basically make a large swath of people fear a certain type. He rolled out his campaign with, when Mexico sends its people, they don't send their best. They're sending drugs, they're sending crime, they're rapists, and I suppose some of them are good people. So in a statement, he basically said that the majority of these brown folks coming from another land are your problem. It's not economic policies that are screwing you over. It's these brown people. It's not bad economic policy. It's not bad healthcare policy. It's not bad education policy. It's these brown people. So that is borrowing from the playbook of Nixon, and it's a playbook that's been used for a very long time. It was used by the Dixiecrats before the Republicans were using it, the segregationists. And honestly, it's time to put that sort of politics to rest. It doesn't belong on any side of the aisle. And we've got to get to a point where we are just debating how we advance economically, healthcare wise, education wise, because the other stuff, it just leads to a lack of governing and a lack of civility.
Absolutely. Bishop Jackson, your turn now. Has it surprised you at all that President Trump has made these baseless allegations of fraud and misconduct continuously over the last 20 some odd days?
Well, I don't know why anybody is surprised at anything Donald Trump does. Donald Trump does not know what normal means. So everything he does is abnormal. And Donald Trump let us know before the election that he was already going to claim that the election was rigged. In fact, he stated point blank that the only way I can lose is if the election is rigged. And so he was already laying the foundation for the argument that he wanted to make. And be frank with you, what is even more interesting to me, those who are listening to Trump and buying into that. In fact, I heard a lady say on television the other day that Georgia always goes red. So how can it now be that Georgia went blue? It's got to be something wrong. Well, again, that's somebody who's in denial. I have a definition for denial. Don't even know I am lying. And that is the fact that demographics don't matter. The status quo must remain the same. Well, not only the demographics in Georgia have changed, but also I think blacks have really become awakened and enlightened. Now, to be frank with you, there are some blacks who I'm surprised supported Donald Trump, but I think they too have been misled under this notion that he has done better for blacks economically than any other president. And the fact is, they're not looking at the facts. Donald Trump came into office with an economy that was on the rise. Barack Obama came into office on an economy that was in a recession. He left Donald Trump an economy that was booming. In fact, even today, more jobs were created during the last 3 years of Barack Obama's administration than the last 4 years of the Trump administration. Black unemployment was decreasing when Barack Obama left office. So people have to be attuned and awake. And so part of our challenge is to make sure our people are woke, as the young folks say.
Absolutely. And with that, gentlemen, I want to harken back to something that we've been talking about a little bit this afternoon, is that over the last week or so, once Georgia finally got to the point of getting ready to certify the election officially for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that has been some of the funnier developments of the post-election period here, is that there have been a number of funny memes and comments about the fact that we have watched Joe Biden beat Donald Trump numerous times now in the state of Georgia, every time the recounts finish. But with that, the level of vitriol that started coming from Donald Trump this week toward his fellow Republicans ratcheted up another notch. He has made some very acerbic comments about Brian Kemp, your governor, and he has also made some nasty comments with regards to Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Secretary of State. Both men supported and voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence this year, but both also have indicated in the last week that their job is to follow the law there in the state of Georgia, and Joe Biden has won the state of Georgia. But yet again, the rhetoric is ratcheting up now. Why has it taken Republicans so long to actually develop a spine and push back against the false narratives of President Trump? We've seen it over the course of the last 4 years, but it's only been in the last week or so that any have been willing, outside of the Mitt Romneys of the world that many consider to be moderates. John McCain, when he was alive, many people felt him to be a maverick, so that he would march to his own drum. But the way that Kemp and Raffensperger have punched back, as well as the governor out in Arizona over the last few days, is somewhat unprecedented among conservatives. Do you gentlemen have any thoughts as to why it is it's taken so long for these men and women to find some backbone and push back against the bully? Go ahead, Chairman Jackson.
So the culture of the Republican side is to fall in line. They unite very easily. And there's ups and there's downs to that. Obviously, if there's a moral dysfunction in the ranks, you're not going to have as many people speaking out about it because they unite under all circumstances. There's a lot of them actually don't like Trump. They just don't have the courage to speak out against it publicly. There was an article that recently came out where several Republican senators, including Marco Rubio and Tim Scott, talked about privately how they can't stand Trump. But the problem is, these are powerful people that if they actually spoke out collectively, they could defeat Trumpism within the Republican Party. And people like Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, wouldn't have to stand alone so much. Because the reality is Trumpism isn't just bad for the Republican Party, it's bad for America. So I think that the solution here is more of there are more Republicans who agree with the Brad Raffenspergers of the party. They just don't speak out. They need to speak out and back him up and say, listen, we're not going to tolerate the insanity here. We're not going to tolerate the circus. We want to govern. We want to put our version of the issues in front of the people versus the Democrats' versions of the issues in front of the people, and stop the circus and let the people decide. But there's a ton who have a win at all costs mentality, and they go along with the circus because that's what they've been told to do. but that is bad for society, and you have to stand above that. You have to stand for something more than just winning the next election and gaining power.
Yes, sir. Bishop Jackson, what has taken Republicans so long to push back against President Trump?
Well, I'm still not convinced that Republicans have found the spine.
Yes, sir.
I commend the Secretary of State for holding his ground, and I think the difference there was his integrity was on the line. There's nowhere in the world he could come out and say, yeah, I messed up the election and Trump should have won, because the facts would not have proven him out. But I think what's happened with the Republican Party, and which I think really ought to be an alarming call to the nation, is the fact that Donald Trump controls the Republican Party. If you look at every poll, over 90% of Republicans across the country support Donald Trump. And so a lot of these Republicans are afraid that if they come out against Trump, they will be primaried, that Trump will come out after them. And so therefore they are afraid and they are intimidated. And I remind us, we should be alarmed that you have a man who has no integrity, no morality, no character, and yet more than 73 million Americans supported him. That ought to be an absolute alarm for the country. 73 million Americans voted for somebody with no character, no morals, and no integrity.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Now, with that, one of the issues that has also been raised here recently, and Chairman Jackson actually touched upon this a few minutes ago when he was giving some of his comments, is the concept that there are so many Republicans that are upset with your Secretary of State Raffensperger, as well as Governor Kemp, that many just might cut off their noses to spite their faces, so to speak, by staying home during the runoff race. Now, again, I'm not going to put all eggs in baskets and with the hope factor, if that happens, oh well, but we are starting to see some of that chatter on social media. I know many of them have left and gone over to that Parler social media website where, you know, they're saying all sorts of things that are not fit to say or print here on this program. But at the same token, there are some very angry Republicans in Georgia who feel as if the top of the line political leaders in their party in the state have abandoned their president, Donald Trump. With that in mind, do you think that that at all, gentlemen, will inure a benefit to John Ossoff as well as Raphael Warnock moving forward in the next few weeks? I'm going to start with you first on this, Bishop Jackson, then I'll kick it over to Chairman Jackson second. Go ahead, Bishop.
Well, I want to thank Donald Trump for coming to Georgia this weekend. I think that is good news for Ossoff and Warnock. What you're going to have this weekend is, I don't think Donald Trump is going to come to Georgia and talk about Purdue and Loeffler. I think he's going to come to Georgia and talk about how the election was stolen from him, how it was rigged, how incompetent the Secretary of State was, and how ineffective the governor is. I can't wait to see if Brian Kemp even shows up on Saturday. But I think what that would do would leave a divided Republican Party in the state. It may be that many of them, because they agree with Donald Trump, may decide whether the election is rigged, so it doesn't make any difference whether we vote, and they may stay home. So if that's what Donald Trump does, my thing is, come on and do your best to divide the Republican Party in Georgia and to help us. That's why I think Donald Trump is. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump cannot take responsibility for anything. He cannot accept the fact it was not incompetence on the part of the Secretary of State, but it was simply the fact that the majority of the American people had said 4 years of this is enough, and they voted for a change. Trump can't bear responsibility that he's the one to blame for his defeat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Chairman Jackson?
Well, I cannot fathom President Trump focusing on anything but himself. He does not care about the Republican Party or the Democratic Party for that matter, or the American people for that matter. Who he cares about is the person in the mirror. and he is going to really, he's going to continue the narrative that is basically causing some of his voters to consider staying home. What I'll say about that is we know it's a movement. We just don't know how big the movement is. And that's why we're not going to depend on it. That's why we have to get out the vote just as rigorously, more rigorously as we did on November 3rd. If that happens, if some of them decide to stay home, that's their right. But we've got to win this regardless.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit about this last aspect before we sign off for the afternoon, which is we all know that the coronavirus pandemic has been arguably the number one issue in America in the year 2020. It has impacted the way we worship. It has impacted the way we work. It has impacted the way that we even play and pursue leisurely activities. With that in mind, there are a number of people who have opined that with the economy being solid when the year began, that one of the things that helped Joe Biden and Kamala Harris this year is the fact that once the coronavirus pandemic really took root and the economy began to tank because of the lack of leadership on a national level from Donald Trump and across the country, Republican governors in many states, that once people started losing jobs and things started to get tighter, that pretty much sounded the death knell for a Trump reelection campaign. Whether you believe that or not, I would like to ask you this. What role do you all believe that the pandemic specifically has had on Georgia turning out for Joe Biden in 2020? And but what role do you believe that the pandemic will play also in regards to this runoff race that is so very important? Bishop Jackson, go ahead with you first, and then Chairman Jackson, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument that the pandemic played a major role in the campaign. And I think that was because of the fact as the campaign was coming in the home stretch, the president kept talking about, we're coming around the corner, it's going to disappear, it's going to go away. And while he was talking about coming around the corner and disappearing, more people were getting infected, more people were dying, more people were becoming unemployed. It is very sad that you have United States, which makes up 4% of the nation's population, makes up about 20% of those around the world who've been infected and who have died. So yes, the pandemic played a major role. And in fact, if it had not been for how awful he handled the pandemic, he may very well have gotten reelected. But let me also say this. I think it's also given the Democrats an opportunity to make a point, which is critically important. And that is the fact that Donald Trump ran on this theme of making America great again. Well, the fact of the matter is the United States again re-ranked #1 in people infected and people died. We have gone down so far as our economy is tanked in the midst of this pandemic. Again, on top of that, you now have world leaders gather together. They crack and make jokes about the president of the United States, and no longer is the United States considered the leader of the free world. What I think Democrats need to do is get a blue hat and put on there these front words. Now it is time to make America great again.
Yes, sir. Chairman Jackson, before you respond, I want to read this. I just pulled this up. It's a comment last night from Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, who we all remember was fired earlier this year. And he was opining similar to the question that I was just asking you two gentlemen, which is what role COVID-19 may have played in Donald Trump's loss. And one of the comments he made last night was that he believes that the president's lack of empathy definitely impacted him in the suburbs and among many white voters. And his quote was 1-2% possibly we lost the suburban families, right? The men and women in the suburbs, Philly suburbs, Atlanta suburbs. I think that goes to one thing. I think it was the decision on COVID to go for opening the economy versus public empathy, Parscale said. And I think that a young family with a young child who were scared to take them back to school wanted to see an empathetic president and an empathetic Republican Party. And I think that, and I said this multiple times, and yet he chose a different path. With that in mind, Chairman Jackson, moving forward, do you think that that is a theme that both Ossoff and Warnock need to continue to sound over and over again with regards to why it is that voters in Georgia should turn out for them over the next few weeks?
So thank you for this last question. Thank you for having me on today. I believe that compassionate conservatism is definitely a thing, and they did not show it. As far as the election, I think a record number of absentee ballots have been submitted, and it definitely helped turnout on the Democratic side. I think involvement in politics has become easier because of going virtual. So that has been the silver lining. Of course, I would never wish anybody getting sick. I want us to flatten the curve. But yeah, I think that overall it did change the election.
Absolutely. And then, gentlemen, last question I want to ask. That was the penultimate question. So this is the last one. What are some things that you are looking forward to in the Biden-Harris administration come January 20th, 2021? It seems like the last 4 years have been a long, long nightmare for many of us, and that hope is on the way. So, Chairman Jackson, I will start that last question with you, and then Bishop Jackson, I will ask you too. What are some things you're looking forward to out of the next administration? Go ahead, Chairman.
Well, I'm going to keep it simple and brief. Student loan relief, healthcare for, a better healthcare policy, and just multiple economic stimuluses. Also, we've got to look at reparations for Black America.
Amen. And it's good to meet you, brother. And Bishop Jackson, go ahead. Same question. What are some things that you're looking forward to out of the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I think the fate of the Biden-Harris administration in large measure is going to depend on how the Senate goes. If we're able to get these 2 Senate seats, it would give them a really strong position by which to get his priorities through. And among those priorities, I think the first is to get this virus under control. Number 2 is the whole issue of health care. And number 3, developing a strong economy that really benefits middle-class America and poor Americans, and not just the top 1 to 10% of the nation's population. And the one final thing, which is really, really important for me, if the Democrats can take control of the Congress, is that I would absolutely love to see the District of Columbia become the 51st state in the nation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As would I. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out this afternoon on the TCR Dialogues. And we look forward to having you both back on in the new year when we start back up, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. But before we sign all the way off, I want to make sure that we show for our viewers a few ads for the DeKalb County Democrats that, again, Chairman Jackson leads. We want to
That's actually DeKalbDems.com, not DeKalbCountyDems.com.
Got you. DeKalb County. Say that again, Chairman Jackson.
DeKalbDems.com.
DeKalbDems.com. Very good. We want to make sure that those who are interested, just because you're not living in Georgia does not mean that in this day and age that you cannot do your part to assist Chairman Jackson and Bishop Jackson and others in bringing it home up in Georgia over the next few weeks. And we also want to make sure that we show our viewers some links to the Ossoff and Warnock campaigns where you can directly contribute. People, $10, $15, $20 can go a long way over the next few weeks. So if the Spirit places on your heart to be able to give, please do, because these campaigns, they need the money to be able to continue to get the message out and to be able to pay folks to make sure they knock on doors and go and spread the message as to why it is we need to flip those 2 Senate seats blue this winter. So again, we want to make sure that everybody pays close attention to that. Okay. We've got Warnock for Georgia up as well. With that in mind, Support the Christian Recorder by buying a subscription for $36 a year. Visit www.thechristianrecorder.com. Support the AME Church Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. We are pleased to announce the topping out ceremony on December 9th at noon for the completion of the steel framework of the new building and encourage you to watch live on this Facebook page. The Advent devotional is now available from the Department of Christian Education as well. You can purchase it by visiting ameced.com. Again, that's ameced.com. Our next TCR dialogue will be in January 2021. That said, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and we look forward to discussing many of the crucial political, social, as well as spiritual topics with you in the days ahead. Take care. God bless. Happy holidays.